Meet Dabi, an expert storyteller who's generated over 50 plus million views for big YouTube channels like Drew Does and The Burnt Chip.
Retention graphs are just a proxy for how people are feeling. There's a very high risk for a long video of the entire video feeling very samey, and samey is very, very bad.
In this video, you'll learn how to write authentic scripts that hook viewers, pacing tricks that work for both short and long form videos, why most creators misunderstand stakes and how you can use them correctly, and more storytelling and retention hacks that you've never heard of. By the end, you'll have a framework for writing videos that not only keep people watching, but leave them wanting more. Yeah, so this is always the biggest question because I'm learning how to do this myself. What's your step-by-step process for studying videos that have worked really well? And how have you applied what you learned to your own videos or client videos?
The start of the question is of that bit is like, actually, how do you figure out what videos are doing well in the first place, right? So I tend to use like the outlier strategy more than just looking at the sheer number of views for a video, because then it's like, okay, like this video has something very interesting that is worthwhile like looking at to start off with. So actually, like, even before you start diving into the storytelling aspect of things, like how successful is this video as a whole, basically, and like what are people commenting in like the comment section, and kind of like what's people's feel regards to this video. So for example, if someone on Twitter is like, oh, this video has like the best storytelling ever, and like I'm always interested in like those sorts of videos and stuff as well. One of the problems that can happen, especially in the strategy space, is that we can be very like, we can get very into the weeds very quickly about like all these like little micro things, but I don't think focusing on the micro is very helpful, because it's actually much more important to be like, oh, like I'm going to watch this video as a viewer first and like understand how I feel about different aspects of this video. When you've got that understanding, you can go back and do a more hardcore analysis, which is like the second pass. And that's the time where you're thinking about like retention, for example, or thinking about like, oh, like this is how this, like all these individual components, whether that's videography, sound design, the way that the script is written, all those different parts then come to like the second part. A little fun trick that I tend to like doing, because it's kind of like a form of deliberate practice, is kind of I like to almost like try to predict where I think retention will drop off at different stages, either based on like past videos that I worked on with like other YouTuber friends and stuff, or based on how I feel about a particular video. And then I'll be like, oh, why does this section like not work? And then for some of the really big YouTubers, you'll find that there's actually not a lot of those like sections, but there'll always be like one or two sections that like feel a bit off, right? And then you also analyze like all the good stuff. Like it's like, oh, like I felt like this part of the video is like amazing. Like I was really locked in. Then I really want to like think about like, oh, what's happening here that makes that interesting.
It took me a couple of years to figure that out, but when it came to studying videos, I would watch it and be like, wow, that worked really well on me. I don't know what just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I actually, it's so funny. The only movie I watched twice recently was I went to watch the most recent Spider-Verse, and I was so blown away by it that actually I went back a second time with a notebook to like do that exact thing. I'll actually like not only take note of what's happening in the actual movie itself, but actually I'll like try to be aware of like how other people are reacting to the movie, because that's like an in real life retention graph, basically.
When I study movies in movie theaters, I think I'll try that in a non-stalker way. I'll try it. I was reading through one of your threads about storytelling, and you're saying that people really confuse stakes, and I think I'm one of those people. To you, stakes means something else. Like you said, it's not just consequences. It's more of like thinking of how much your characters care about what happens.
In terms of videos where I worked on where we've got stakes, I hope he doesn't mind me talking about this, but there's a video by Nick AR. He's like a really good YouTube friend of mine. Brilliant guy, very, very hardworking. But one of the videos that I did really well was I died 22,000-ish times for this platinum trophy, which we came up with this title together. So I'm very proud of that title too. Originally, the way that we started, or that he started it, was kind of, he was trying to get through the first like level really quickly. This has been a huge challenge. And then actually he mentioned at some point in time that he'd actually tried this challenge before a few years ago, but it was like really difficult, and then he couldn't actually do it back then. So I was like, you should really like emphasize that, because that's like kind of going to make it hype if you do like achieve it, right? That stakes is not just like, oh, can I complete this particular challenge or not? That stakes is like, this is like personal. This is something that matters to me in terms of whether I complete it or not, because like this is like obstacle that I've never been able to overcome before. And so that means that the loss is like higher. Stakes are very, very emotionally based. For example, there's a lot of videos that are like, oh, I gotta do this in like 24 hours or whatever. Like, that's boring by itself. Like, that's a very arbitrary stake. The viewer's always gonna be wondering, well, you know, like, if you don't complete this thing in 24 hours, why should I care about that? Versus all the stuff that, for example, MrBeast is doing at the moment. They do a very interesting shortcut. They'll always, of recent videos and with storytelling, they'll bring the family in and be like, yeah, this is your family, your family is here to see you complete this challenge, right? That's a super duper emotional stake, but there's also one that's very relatable to like people as well. Another example might be if someone's entire bank account is like only $500 and they have to make one gamble that's $500, then that's a huge stake for them, right? But if like a millionaire loses $500, that's like them paying like, I know, for an expensive meal at a restaurant, so it doesn't matter.
I haven't been watching the most recent MrBeast videos. I think I should, because the most recent one was like the one where he's like curing blind people's blindness and like paying for their surgeries and giving them money after, and that was one of the best videos I've ever seen on YouTube. Have you seen that Casey Neistat video where he has to rescue the drone? Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one.
In summary, it's basically like he lost his drone on a giant New York building. But the problem is, it's not easy to get to because New York buildings are really weird to navigate. You can't just take an elevator up. There's like constructions, there's issues, etc. But he goes through all these different problems and solutions that don't work. But in the end, he uses like rope or something to pull it up, and then it like cuts to black right at the top, and you don't know if he's going to get it or not. Again, I think about it in simple terms. The stakes are, is Casey not getting his drone back?
Whether he gets it back or not is kind of like the ongoing open loop or the ongoing plot point, right? But actually, the fact when he's tried a lot of times, and then because each particular time, I assume he's becoming more and more invested. They're getting more and more frustrated. It's like,
Okay.
Why can't I get this freaking drone or something? So then that becomes the stake. So that stake actually develops like over the course of the video, as he's like, I got to do this. This means something to me. Another case that actually does that super well was this one where he basically tries to complete a marathon in under 10 minutes. No, not 10 minutes, but like under like a certain time frame. And then like he tries, like, it's a real story in the sense that it's like filmed over years and years and years. And so he's trying, and like every single time he gets very, very close to like getting this time that he wants on the marathon, but never quite makes it. And so when he actually does make it, like, and that's like a probably, I don't know, like 70% of the way through the video. Like it's I can't remember if it's at the end or 70%, but like it's like this huge payoff, and everyone like in the comments is like, "Oh wow, this is like amazing." So that's sort of stakes more so than plot point precisely. If that helps.
I like the way you're thinking about it because he was super frustrated.
Yeah.
So my question is like, how can you like balance that authenticity of that YouTube creator or character?
Ooh.
But it's obviously like a lot of planning and writing that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know about unless you really dig deep.
I think that, I agree with the title and the thumbnail and hook being the most important part of the video. The packaging there actually directs the rest of the video as well. I hate to keep using this to be an example, but it's just like the one everyone knows. So like, for example, like $1 versus $250,000 yacht. Like, like exactly what you're in for when you're strapped in for that ride. Whereas something like I Built a Car Out of Scooters by Michael Reeves, you're not 100% sure, but you've got a rough idea, right? If I think about the video as a whole, what parts of this video are the ones that are going to make people be like, oh wow, this is like amazing, or this is like awesome. In general, if you just start off with like these individual segments of like, okay, here's like a problem, here's a solution, then that's a really good way to start. And then once you've plotted those sorts of segments out, then you can start to think about like the one thing that I want people to remember from this video, like what is like my North Star of what I'm focusing on. Ultimately, like a heartwarming emotion is that I want them to feel educated and like feel like, oh my god, like this stuff is like mind-blowing, because people won't necessarily remember like 2 or 3 seconds of a video, but they might remember the video as a whole, then the peak end rule, which is the climax of the video and the end of the video. Basically, there's different levels of script writing. I think George has actually talked about this as well. There's some script writing which is where you try to script out the entire thing, and then there's like, as you go into more and more complex and more hard to deal with in terms of editing, you get to like different levels where it's like, oh, like everything is unscripted, which is really, really hard actually to do. In terms of balancing, I suppose, authenticity versus script writing. The best YouTubers, what they do is like Michelle Khare, I was thinking about is a really good example. They've got like a sort of idea, like a structure for how they want their story to play out, and they know like sort of where the major story beats will be within that particular script or video. But they don't know exactly how they're going to play out. The whole idea is that you're creating these situations where something interesting could happen, and then you're out reacting to that sort of stuff in real time. If you just think about what authenticity is and just go really back to basics, right? It's this kind of like imperfection or this lack of veneer and polish that that might be typical of, for example, like a news or like even a very, very formally edited movie. And so this is something that's very specific to YouTube, right? Because that authenticity is like kind of rooted in that roughness with things.
So there's just basically essentially at the start of January, end of December, end of January, if you're like really active on Twitter, there's just a lot of people that are just talking about do long form, focus on long form, forget
Oh yeah.
shorts, go from 30 minutes to an hour plus. That's the best way to continue to grow on YouTube. But what are your thoughts on it?
My thought on why like all this super duper long form stuff is doing well, like on the first instance, it might be like, oh, okay, it's because the average view duration is like so high that therefore YouTube is rewarding these videos with extra watch time. But I think that like people on YouTube, they all have different like intents in terms of how long they want to watch something for. Longer videos are harder to make for sure. And they take a lot more editing, especially if you're doing like a polished like video as opposed to some random live stream, for example. Here is this asymmetry in terms of people wanting to watch longer stuff, especially on TV, but then there not being enough videos to fill that gap. That's why like shorts, for example, like really popped off initially, is because you've got this huge amount of demand, but you don't necessarily have like a lot of shorts. Now there's much more shorts, but like before when it first started popping off, there weren't that many, right? So you've almost got this like, but there's a lot of YouTube videos already existing in the middle sort of 8 minutes to 20-minute range. So yeah, you've got this like gap on either side of like the length graph, I guess. A lot of the pacing for those videos has to be a bit more relaxed, but also you have to still vary a lot of stuff because like people like they can pay a lot of attention if it's something interesting going on, but you can't do that all the time. If you had an action scene, there's like one gigantic car chase for like 20 minutes. That might be very exciting at first, but it gets very, very draining by the end of the 10 minutes. You're kind of like, oh, like everything feels the same, and you really need those like differences in pacing, in tension, in whatever to happen, so that people can almost like reset themselves to be prepared for the next thing.
Because that's why I can't watch a lot of action movies. It's really some scenes are way too long, but versus like if you've seen John Wick, it's like, dude, there's so many pattern interruptions like every couple of minutes.
And then the pacing as the video goes on as well, like you can get away with deeper things in terms of character development, in terms of like how long you make certain scenes sort of go out. By the time people are there are like 20 or 30 minutes, they've been sat on their chair for 20, 30 minutes, right? So their intent is generally they're not going to leave unless you do something like really stupid or it's really boring, for example. So when you're thinking about how videos are playing out in your mind, you're actually thinking of the visual first rather than the words. What people's eyes are physically looking at and the information that they're getting from the screen is inherently visual. So you got to think like, okay, like what's the composition of like this general visual? Is this visual different from the visual that was like right beforehand, for example? And that like provides more contrast between them. You're thinking about like, okay, like how much movement is there in this visual? If you want like lots of excitement, you have lots of movement. If you want like things to be more serene or even like jarring sometimes, then you might just have like hardly any movement at all in the scene, right? A dirty secret of some YouTubers is that like they'll go almost music first when it comes to videos, and then they'll really like feel like, okay, like this music ends at this particular moment, and I want to like transition right here and like have that be the punch of that particular segment.
Just how do you define YouTube storytelling and what key elements make a story compelling on the platform?
Yeah, this question that always gets me. You want to have a particular impact on a person, and then YouTube storytelling is how do you craft a video to lead to that impact. Now you've got this thing that you're trying to, this piece of information that you're trying to send to someone, or this kind of emotion that you want to feel. And how do you package that in a way that's optimal for YouTube? And that's YouTube storytelling. That has like a lot of unique properties within inside that. People not going to be exposed to the entire story necessarily. In fact, we can see on the retention graphs that people like drop off very quickly at the start, right? If you want to get people to hear your message effectively or feel emotion effectively, is how do I keep people continue to watch in the first place? And that's very unique to YouTube. People in the cinema generally won't leave unless like it's a terrible movie. The choice to spend time on every video is a cost to people, and they are constantly evaluating at the start. Is the cost of watching this video going to be worth my time? How do you signal to someone this is a good video? Well, part of it might be the individual elements that make up a video that signals as good. Like it might be like the videography, might be like, oh, like this start is like really funny already. That's like a Ryan Trahan special. Like he always starts off with something that's like a bit funny, right? But the whole reason for that is this signal, like, if I'm already like finding this part enjoyable, then probably the rest of the video is going to be quite enjoyable as well.
A follow-up I had, and then even when I watch a video that has a good hook, right? I like stop watching at like 1 to 3 minutes sometimes because I'm like, this isn't really going where I thought it would. Where do you think people mess that part up so often?
This is what I would call intent mismatch, basically. So whatever intent that you came into the video with, for some reason at minute number 3 or 4, it's no longer filling that intent. Where is this going? Right? Because you shouldn't have that feeling. If the video is doing its job, you should never have that feeling of like, where is this video going? You should always be like, I know where this video is going, and like I'm here for the ride because I really want to keep on like experiencing this video and like you like get toward the end of where this is going, sort of thing. Sometimes videos pop off. I think Sam Slick is the example that people usually give of where something is not very edited, but yet still gets millions or 2 million views or whatever. Actually, the reason those videos still pop off is because they're still fundamentally adhering to the person's intent, the viewer's intent, right? So the viewer is always feeling like, like this is a really interesting video. They only care that they're receiving the information or feeling the emotion that they want to get from a particular video. Once you understand that viewers have all like a very heterogeneous set of intents, you really got to understand what is it the viewer wants from this video, and then you want to be delivering that in lots of different doses over time throughout the course of that video. I think Ali Abdal did post a retention graph once for one of his listicles, and I managed to screenshot it like immediately. I was like, this is interesting. But actually, it goes like, it drops very quickly at the start, and then it goes up, and then goes down, goes up, and goes down, goes up, which is pretty simple for like a listicle type structure. But that video is like a few million views, right? Because it's just something that matches the intent super duper well of people wanting to save time or whatever productivity video that was.
It's really interesting. The viewer intent stuff. It's is there any way to kind of figure out how to match what people want, or is it just basic trial and error, studying comments, etc.?
I already know what Side Hustles 1 to 4 is, therefore I don't need to watch them. Therefore, I only watch Side Hustle 5. So when it comes to educational content in this particular intent specifically, you've always got to have something that feels like it's something that people don't know. Even if people think they know it, but they don't actually know in reality, they will still not watch it. So you actually got to like almost put people off balance a little bit and be like, you don't know this thing. That's why there's videos that are like the, what is it? The Kid Reza effect, or the one that was like about Life of Reza, the YouTube channel, and then like someone made up a name for it, which is like the Kid Reza effect or something, and like that video like popped off. Now this video has a name that makes it sound like it's this big like intellectual property thing. Let's say it's proprietary. People don't know about it yet. I don't know about what this thing is, so therefore that must be an interesting video, or this idea must be interesting because I don't know what it is. They should understand like the promise of what's coming. 10 time management tips that I'm pretty sure you would never have heard about before. Like that's pretty interesting, right? Because the promise is still fulfilled. So that promise intent is still like, I'm going to save time watching this video. But then they don't leave because they're not like, look, I know it's just about Parkinson's law, and I know it's just about like putting stuff in a calendar. If you start off with stuff like that and people like watch those two things, they're going to be like, nah, this is not useful for me.
When George was like having his agency thing, his take-home test was talking about, what potential retention problems happened in the XYZ video. And one of them was Mike Shake trying to achieve like, I think, Olympic times or competitions or something that actual professional athletes did. Like for example, he's trying to beat maybe a Serena Williams tennis record or something,
Hmm.
which in his own way, something like that. But the point is, like, he spent so long on the first challenge. I was like, dude, I don't know how much longer I can watch you mess up this challenge. I kind of want you to, I kind of
Yeah.
want you to either succeed or realize you can't do it and move on to the next one. He was doing it for a
Yeah.
good 7-8 minutes, so
There's a lot of nuance in that actually. How you decide on whether you front load or back load the video makes a big difference to a video as well. You look at a lot of Mr. Beast videos that are all front loaded because I think that their sort of ethos is you want to give people a reward pretty quickly, and that this is an ethos that's been developed over time. So it's like actually like it's almost now very sophisticated to the point where you don't quite recognize it. But like in the very very early videos, the hook event payoff was like so quick. It was like if you can lift this thing, you're gonna get 100, like $500 or whatever. And then like it's like okay, like in the first like 20 seconds, you get this reward, right? So it was really like hyper, like at the start. Now it's evolved to be more sophisticated and like try to include more foreshadowing and hype and stuff like that. I think front loading the video, generally speaking, is going to be better for most cases because you want to have like a reward for people like reasonably quickly, basically, to make them feel like, oh, like, this is fantastic. Like I want more of this. Like give me more, sort of thing.
yeah.
Another approach that sometimes people take or think about is they want to like make that first point super duper long. Like maybe for example, the case of my Shake video. I'm not sure like if George or Mike specifically thought about it this way, but like reason for doing that is because within a segment you don't get much in terms of you won't get as much in terms of segmentation loss. So but it's out like right after the first segment is finished, then you get like a dip for sure. Like it happens to every single person unless you like are like an expert of like transitioning that dip with like something more open loop. What's the way to prevent all these people from dropping off? Well, you just make that segment really, really long. so then like people don't feel this sense of like, oh, it's finished. There's this one
Interesting.
video that I really hate, like with a passion. I hate this video with a passion, and because it came up on my feed once on Facebook, and Facebook doesn't actually optimize for satisfaction. Or at least when I watched the video, something did not. And it was basically it was so funny because it was about this guy who was cheating with this other girl, and then like there's this third girl that was just like obviously not being able to see the cheating that was going on in the background, and the entire video was just like all these like near misses of how the girl almost turned around but then couldn't see the other girl, and so you were just waiting and waiting and waiting for this thing to happen, this conflict to happen basically. So that's a bad example of like an open loop where it, like, and all the comments were also like, this is like a waste of 15 minutes of my life. In the long term, I think that approach is actually very bad because you don't want to decondition people from watching future videos because they will be like, you get that immediate like retention for that video, for that segment, and then they'll drop off and then they'll never watch a video again because like this video is like so pointless to watch. I hate watching this sort of stuff. Another solution to that though, and this is a clever thing that Ali Abdal did, was like within a single point, it has a lot of little sub points. It was like a huge amount of sub points in it, because that way you can still make people feel like they're satisfied without actually necessarily making them feel like they're wasting their time getting to the whole point, if that makes sense.
Awesome. I really like that breakdown. Thanks for going deep into that with me. Essentially, there's creators that really want to hone in on storytelling. And a big part of that is setups and payoffs, which it sounds simple, especially in the outlining and planning stage. But when you actually implement it into writing and editing, it doesn't come out like you thought it would. What tricks or strategies do you use to know how to properly create setups and payoffs for a video?
Going back to viewer intents, like payoffs are generally related to the viewer intents, right? So for example, if it's educational, then it has to be a piece of education or an insight. If it's like entertainment, it's probably something funny that's happened or some success that's been overcome, right? So you start off almost like thinking, okay, like the payoff is going in this emotional direction. And then you start to think about like, how do I get a setup to go towards that payoff? One video I'm gonna make kind of soonish is talking about building an AI cat. And so, for example, the setups and payoffs there, like payoff is the parts of the cat that are being built. And it's like, oh, this is like a head, or this is like an actual moving legs and stuff, then you think about like, okay, how do I make this setup such that it creates like hype for that payoff, and it creates like a situation where that payoff actually feels like a payoff. Thinking about like, how do you add more attention? How do you add more like trickiness and stuff, or more like this is a big obstacle that I need to overcome in order to get to this particular payoff. Like, how do you make people feel more like that? Maybe that's in script writing, maybe that's more in just social proof, for example. That's like a specific technique where it's like someone else, if they say, oh, this is impossible, and you're like, no, I think it's possible, and they're like, no, you can't do this. Like, that's an interesting like thing, right? Then when the event happens and you do it, it's like, oh shit, you did do it. Like, amazing. You feel great. Everyone feels great. It feels like a payoff.
So if we use the Casey Neistat video, I guess
yeah,
between yours and mine, they sound very similar of how they were structured. If the stakes are just the frustrations that Casey is feeling towards trying to achieve a certain goal, would the tension be the events causing that?
I think the tension would be how he emotionally feels and all the obstacles that he's coming across, and
Okay.
then like the emotional reaction that comes from just physically being frustrated by stuff, right? But you can't have that be too drawn out, because if you don't like have at least a little bit of progression, then people feel also like really frustrated. Like, they will get stressed and annoyed watching your video. So you gotta
Yeah.
have like little segments of like, like I think we're making some progress. Like I'm doing this, and this is trouble, 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 trouble. Oh wait, hold on, we've got a bit of a breakthrough here. And that's like a mini payoff, right? Towards that macro payoff of like, do I get the drone or not, or whatever the end of that is. It's not even technically my piece of knowledge. It's actually from Masahiro Sakurai, which is the creator of Smash Bros. And also the creator of Kirby, the series. So very, very knowledgeable in terms of how people have fun and play video games and stuff. So he talked about this idea of stress relief, growth, progress as kind of being the science of fun. But you got to have like you got to have stress in order to have someone conquer that stress. And then when they've conquered the stress, then that's the belief and that's the feeling of fun, especially if they feel like they're growth and progressing. In the context of video games, it might be that you're playing a really hard level, and this level is very difficult to beat, and then you finally beat the boss, and you feel like, yay, like, everyone knows that sort of satisfaction, right? It can be applied to like YouTube storytelling, and then how videos are constructed, and it can also be applied to how even how you communicate different concepts across to people. Because if you start off with the answer, then people won't always feel that they've gained much. But if you start off with a big problem, then create more problems, be like, oh my god, there's like 100 different things or like problems here, and then you come up with like, oh, but actually, if you think about it this way, bam, that's a huge insight for people.
I think we talked about this a decent amount, but let me know if you have anything to add. But it's just about like how you approach pacing and rhythm of a video to make sure people watch it.
Okay, so pacing and rhythm, they're two different things. Pacing is just like physically what is a tempo of a video, whereas rhythm is within like, how are these beats spaced out over time? What do they look like? So like the general approach I take is like the start should generally be a bit faster paced, because you need to sort of fill people more reasons to be like, oh, like this video is gonna like be good, and they're very keen to click off. Sometimes you can get away with slow pace type stuff, but that is again is another intent like matching thing. So like, for example, if someone's expecting like a very slow, calm video in Japan, which is like a calm travel vlog, then of course you're not gonna start like, today I visited Japan for 100 hours and we're gonna blah blah. If you're talking about like longer videos, the pace, if it's a short video, you can sort of have a bit more room to move with pacing being like the same. But when it comes to like a longer video, pacing at different points has to be different, because otherwise there's no contrast between, like, there's a very high risk for a long video of the entire video feeling very samey, and samey is very, very bad, because people just sort of almost like the drool like starts to fall from their mouth as like this is just more and more and more of the same thing. You don't want people to feel like that. You want them to be like, oh, like something different happened. Rhythm is very fun. I think that rhythm serves a few things. So one is that rhythm is fundamentally about expectation, right? So the idea is like, if you've got something like click, 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 then you know that like it's very, very predictable, and that's why it's boring, because it's too predictable, right? But then if you like have something that's on the offbeat, like it's like, oh, like that's a bit weird. Like what's happening there? I actually talked about I went because I found Spider-Verse so fascinating, and then I looked up the animator or one of the animators on Spider-Verse, and his name is Jordan Barg. And then he had this short film that he made and posted on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like somehow like this video was like so funny, and like I don't understand like how this works, but it's like so good. Like I wonder how does he think about like rhythm and pacing? Because the rhythm I think was part of why it was so interesting and funny. And then what he said to me was that humor tends to land on the offbeats. So if your expectation is this, humor is on the offbeats, and some version of expectation is on the offbeats of rhythm. So rhythm changes is really going to be something that's very valuable for any YouTuber really to understand.
No, I think you explained it really well. You think about Ryan Trahan, he really
Yeah.
executes his humor very well. Whether he's doing it on purpose or not, he does that really well.
Ryan Trahan is a very expert at that. So, like for example, Ryan Trahan joke: these plushies at this particular Disney store were $50 each. Who in their right mind would buy? And then he's got like the plushies, like sort of thing. If you're musically inclined, you have a bit of an advantage there, but anyone can learn it, of course, because rhythm is like simple to learn. So
some people say they don't even look at their attention graphs, they don't study it, whatever. But then you seem to be really into retention. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, obviously, for whatever people think, but is retention something that creators should really focus on honing in on?
Retention graphs are just a proxy for how people are feeling. Where people go wrong with retention graphs and retention in general is they come up with these terms like Mr. Beastification, and they're like, oh, like, optimizing for retention makes these videos feel like crap. Whenever they're referring to Mr. Beastification, they're never referring to Mr. Beast himself, who's like amazing at like storytelling and video editing. They're always referring to like all these copycats that tried to like do the really fast-paced Mr. Beast style, but never quite hit it. Optimizing for retention in and of itself is obviously like kind of stupid. Keeping people's attention is not something that's fundamentally satisfying to the viewer. However, retention itself is a very important part of what is satisfying to a viewer, because people's attention is very important too. So like, if you're just optimizing purely for attention, then you're not going to get too far. But I think if you're optimizing, like understanding that this retention/attention is really just a part of what makes up the feeling that people are getting from this video, then it starts to become a very powerful and objective tool of how to like optimize your videos. It's one of the very few tools that you can use to be like, okay, moment by moment, this is what's happening, to my viewer as they're watching this video. So I think like optimizing for retention is actually very important in the sense that it's part of a greater whole. Satisfaction is at the heart of like the YouTube algorithm, like clickability, watch time, and satisfaction. It's always comes up when I give a thumbs up. But satisfaction is measured, like sometimes satisfaction is measured explicitly by things like likes and dislikes, and so satisfaction like probably has a lot of things that are within that. Oh, the surveys as well is a more explicit one, where it's just like, do you like this video? Was this a good recommendation? Happy face or sad face?
So you actually do go through the retention graph and understand what's happening. Like you don't just go, you don't just toss it to the side, basically.
Yeah, the problem with people's understanding of retention graphs is that they misinterpret it, and that's why they think that it's bad. So for example, like people might look at a retention graph and be like, oh my god, like this, what's going on? Like this retention graph is so good, and yet my video only has like a few thousand views, as opposed to this other video like is doing amazing, it's got like 1 million views, but yet my retention graph looks a lot worse, therefore retention must be bad. It's not bad, it's just a misinterpretation, right? Because naturally, as you have a broader audience of people, then people's intent compared to, like, if you look at those videos that like get like 1 million views versus those videos that get a few thousand views, right? You got to look at like the subscribed to not subscribed ratio as well. I can always guarantee you, like a lot of those times, the videos that have like a really high retention but low views is because like 80% of the people that watch the video are subscribers. The graphs where there's like 1 million views that has a crappier retention graph, it's because like 95% of the people aren't subscribed to your channel at all. Like the key thing about retention graphs is that you got to interpret it always as a relative thing. And I think that that's the best way to look at it. So for example, if you have an individual segment that's like flatter than like another segment, then that's probably a good thing. Even if like overall both of those segments are slowing down, but like this segment is slowing down slower than the other segment is like slowing down. That's still like better, and then that's actually quite reliable. Yeah, ABD is another one of those things that falls into the exact same category of interpretation trouble. Yeah, I think people went a bit too far on the other direction of like the anti-retention, and it's because they don't understand that like retention did nothing wrong to you. It's just a graph. It's a measure of people that's like completely objective. There's another graph actually in YouTube Studio where you can actually see at each point like how many people in terms of number are like lost at each point, which is very funny. That's all the retention graph is, so it's objective, and I think people should use it as a data point, not as something necessarily that they should just purely optimize for, but as a part of the greater picture of like, hey, like maybe this section isn't as good. Maybe we could have like improved this section a lot. And it gives you that ability to diagnose those sections, whereas otherwise you may not have the ability to diagnose them if you didn't have a retention graph.
I do like that breakdown because for me, I don't always agree with the just ignore retention graphs. If anything, I mainly use it to focus on my hooks because that's something I'm working on.
It requires a lot of interpretation and like nuance, I think. And more than I think a lot of people give it. Videos have different retention graphs in terms of like niches as well. So like educational videos like always have a really sharp like drop, like much more than even entertainment videos and stuff. Then it has like that sort of bumpy like listicle graph a lot of the time too. There's been like more than a fair share of videos that I post on with like a few million views and stuff. And like those retention graphs, like they'll have like a pretty shallow like it's a pretty short time before it like levels off. I think that's like the ideal for like entertainment. The ones I work on, at least, like a lot of the time it's like a very like it's like still going down, but it's like a straight line going down. So there's no big like dips apart from when people mention sponsors. That one you can't like help, but like other times like you should aim for like a English, no really steep segments and stuff.
I like asking everyone this question because everyone has their own ways of doing this, but have you found ways to just beat blank page syndrome?
So like it depends on why you're getting blank page syndrome in the first place. In other words, like you just get blocked in terms of like stuck for something, right? You're like, where do I start with this particular video? So two main unblockers will be one, just write anything. Like literally, like you can write the worst, most terrible thing, and then just like get it all out on paper. And then like go back and refine it and then rewrite it basically, because that first one is the hardest like write. So that's one way to do it. Otherwise, the second way I tend to do it is if I'm really like stuck and I don't know. Creativity is a function of inputs and you as a filter and then outputs, right? So it means that actually, hey, I need to have more inputs because I have a lack of inputs here. That's why I can't like generate something from scratch. So then you just might like literally watch someone else or be like, okay, how has XYZ has approached it? And then maybe like combine like 4 or 5 of those people, and then suddenly you've got a whole bunch of stuff to work with then. And then you can be like, I'm going to pick the best parts of these things and then put that into my process, and then you output as your own unique thing.
The quick follow-up I had is how you differentiate being a direct copycat versus remixing something.
Remixing involves intentionality, and that's what copycats lack. They have the intention, I guess, to steal your stuff, but they don't have like any original thought put into the things. So like there's all this original thought that gets put into it that makes it okay. Like this idea, maybe someone else will build something that's very, very similar, but maybe they've done it in a completely different way and a different style and stuff. And then they've like put all this like thought and effort into it. And it's like, okay, like this has gone from beyond the original idea, which they've taken, and still like the other person's idea. But now it's like something that's evolved into its own being. Humans, we all copy each other. And I think that like other people don't necessarily realize that everything that we are is just a copy of something else that we've seen in the past, whether that's like, well, I mean, like if you look into our DNA, like our DNA is literally a copy of our parents' DNA with like some random changes and stuff. So it started from like before we were even born. So but I think that like in terms of how do you be original in this world where copying always seems like a good thing to do because it's so like you can get a lot of views for copying and stuff, but ultimately though, like you have to create original thought, I think, in order to be differentiated from like other people. If you're just trying to occupy the space that other people are already occupying, then it's not going to be as valuable for you as if you occupy a space that no one else is really occupying and that you kind of own yourself. Other people's videos and other people's video successes are kind of a reflection of the current market. But when you're really the leader, you're almost like generating a market that doesn't exist yet. And that market is kind of based in reality in the sense that you have to experiment to get there because maybe there's no one else like in that particular space yet.
This is all advice from me too. For the last question I have, what do you think are the key components of writing a good YouTube script? And if you're willing to share, what do you do when it comes to writing a script?
A lot of my recent scripts have been like, oh, like this cool thing came up on Twitter. I'm like, that sounds like a cool idea. But I'm sure no one's made a YouTube video on it yet. So maybe I'll make a thing from there. Creating a script from scratch. So it's almost like the scaffolding, like, okay, like if I'm going to make this video, like what are the major points that I want to hit in this video before like I even start to write any physical words. And then from there, writing the physical words. Yeah, but also like there's words are also tied heavily with visuals and stuff too. So that's I think it changes from niche to niche as to how you do it. So like it's hard to give very broad advice on how exactly to do a script, but fundamentally the things that you're looking for, at least at the start, is like, okay, like how do I, one, signal to people that this video is what they came for, and then two, how do I convey across things in a way that's like satisfying for them as quickly as possible. As you're going through and scripting more and more, it's like, okay, like how do I build out these individual sections? Like how do I imagine this to actually turn out in the video when I'm doing it? And then like converting that visual imagination into words.
Thank you again for taking time out of your week to do this. Really learned a lot. I'm so excited to share this with other people.
I can't wait to see it. Yeah, please let me know when you post this. I'd love to like repost it and stuff.